Recording. Hello, my name is Nicholas. Thank you for checking out my video. I have received some text messages, but because I'm old-fashioned, I like to write everything out. So I have notes here, and the topic is the keto diet. You know, if you do bodybuilding or fitness, you may have heard of this, but I come across a lot of videos or just a lot of people, personal trainers, you name it, who make this more difficult than what it has to be. And whenever I think of the keto diet, I just think of fuel in the body, meaning you have amino acids, triglycerides, fatty acid chains, as I would call them, and amino acids. There are amino acids that are glucogenic and ketogenic. But before I jump into this, I want to speak freely. For those of you who are interested in this topic, feel free to sit around, and if you have any questions or thoughts, please post or send me an email. Well, in order to get your body, as I would like to say, into the ketogenic, or you're going to be using fat as a fuel for energy, or even amino acids, the simple way to put it is think of somebody who is decreasing their carbohydrate intake or decreasing their calories overall. You know, your body has to go through a phase, as I'm going to describe now, to supply you with needed energy to perform. So for example, there is a phase, and this is not really for everyone, but this is the common phase. If you ever hear me talk about my phases, this may make a little bit of sense. There is the 3-hour to 12 to 48 hour mark, okay? So within that cycle, let's just say you ingest a meal of carbohydrates and other things. You're going to have enough glucose and you're going to be able to utilize that. Let's just say if you're getting done with the workout and you eat a high glycemic, let's just throw that in. Your body may use that to restore your glycogen stores, replenishing your glycogen stores. During the 12 to 18 hour mark, let's just say you're not ingesting a certain amount of carbs, okay, carbohydrates. Your body will go through another mechanism, I call it reactions, to put glucose into your bloodstream, okay? I think they call it your liver glycogen stores, glycogenolysis, or glycogenolysis, as other people pronounce it that way. And all that means is that you're taking your branch, as I would like to call it, and it's being broken apart to be put into your bloodstream, okay, with your muscles. And so at this point we have to consider briefly a class of enzymes. In the liver, I believe there is the phosphatase, and in the muscle there is the phosphorylase enzyme. Now they sound alike, but I believe they do different things, or common, but there are more enzymes that I'm not going to speak about that are involved and do a lot of things, and with more research I guess we will find out more. But just to continue, in the muscle you have to consider the glucose molecule, if you will, and the phosphate group. So in all, the phosphate group is not necessarily pulled from it meaning glucose, and so it remains in that area of the muscle, and glycogen from the bicep does not go to glycogen in the quad. I don't think it travels, so it's utilized at that site. So it's there for your muscle to use. After that point, there is the 18 to 40 hour mark. And for most healthy individuals, he or she will switch over to protein, then to fats as a fuel of energy. Now the question is, why does your body do all this? Why doesn't your body just stick with using protein versus fat? Well, in the body, if you consider what protein is, protein, in my mind, there are amino acids, and the amino acids are the building blocks to protein. So you have to consider your muscle. Fat can be stored anywhere. It is very easy to store fat on your legs, on your butt, wherever you store it, okay? And most people want to get rid of that, right? With protein, I mean, for your arms, it takes work to build that muscle up. Plus, you have to consider your immunity, proteins, amino acids, enzymes. Amino acids act as precursors to other things, whether it be hormones. So protein itself in the body, or amino acids, as I would like to call it, is important, but also different classes of lipids are equally important as well. So your body switching to fat makes a whole lot of sense, right? So when your body gets into that phase of, let's just say you're 1 to 2 days or even a week into a keto diet. Now with a keto diet, I don't want to just limit it to low carb. There are certain levels of intensity with that. There are some people who may ingest 200 grams of carbs, 100 grams of carbs, or no carbohydrates at all. That seems kind of difficult to do, but there are people who actually do it, usually fitness and bodybuilding competitors who really want to utilize fat tissue. A person like my father who's a diabetic, of course he has metabolic issues, and therefore if you consider a diabetic type 2, my father, of course, could not utilize, let's just say, glucose. So he was in, how would you say, that ketone formation type of thing. And I'll explain how that happens just shortly. So therefore, he, he had all this glucose in his blood that just wasn't being used the way it should be. And so, of course, he was using protein, mostly protein. Now again, if you heard me correctly, I said your body usually switches. So with my father, if you considered his muscle mass, he had very little muscle mass compared to fat mass. So his body, that shift in metabolism and all things really did not occur. So at this point, we should consider the term gluconeogenesis. When I think of that, it's creating glucose from non-glucose substrate. So let's consider the triacylglycerol, the fat that we're talking about. There's the glycerol and the fatty acids. There's liberation that occurs. The glycerol and the fatty acid go their way, whatever pathway. Okay, and I believe the glycerol plays into another pathway to generate glucose. My father, his muscle mass is just utilized, if you want to call it that, and therefore he has a decrease in muscular strength, decrease in immunity, and we also have to consider the blood glucose that's already present, and now we're putting more into that. And so of course, just to get to the point with diabetes, that disease, I call it a metabolic disease at some point depending on all things, contributes to heart disease and damaging the vessels, the wall of it, and that's why strokes and other things occur, because of the damage that is done from all the things playing in and creating an obstruction of blood flow to the brain. But we're getting off topic, but I just wanted to leave it there. So that's just an example of a person who is normally healthy versus someone who is not. 1, 2, 3. So at this part of the video, I want to emphasize some points that maybe we can relate to. So let's just consider a male or female who is on the keto diet, or a low carb diet to be exact, or maybe a low calorie diet. He or she at this point, okay, let's just say is using fats as fuel. And because of their low consumption of carbohydrates, he or she may say, oh, you know, my energy levels are down. I'm going to have a cheat day. Has anyone ever had that moment? I know I have. But what that cheat day does is actually shock the body and possibly replenish glycogen stores. So that cheat day is not necessarily a bad thing. But if one gets back into doing that, ingesting high glycemic candy and all things, that may put them backwards in time. I just wanted to make that clear. And this makes perfect sense. If your glycogen stores are low, your ability to do intense training is off, and even to burn fat as well, because I believe that you need glycogen in order to do physical feats. I don't care how, whether it's cardio, weight training. So at this point, I want to talk about fat as fuel and the fatty acid. Now, if you consider a triacylglycerol, basically you have a glycerol and fatty acids. There are odd and even fatty acids, but let's just keep it simple and just consider the reactions that occur with that fatty acid, because I'm not going to say the end result is acetyl-CoA, but at that point you want to get into that cycle with that in order to reap the benefits. And so, for example, let's just say you consider a fatty acid. There is acetyl-CoA and trans-NAL-CoA. hydroxyacyl-CoA, and keto-acyl-CoA. All right, and then your end result may be acyl-CoA and acetyl-CoA. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And with acetyl-CoA, if you consider the primary fuel you're using at that period of time, I often think of the body being flooded with it because you're utilizing fat. So when there's a buildup, as I would like to say, your body goes through another series of reactions, everything's reactions, to, I would say, transform it, acetyl-acetyl-CoA, and then there's acetyl-acetate, beta-hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. And acetone, hydroxybutyrate, and acetyl-acetate are the ketones. And ketones themselves are not just useless in the body. Depending on who you talk to and what you read, it may decrease your appetite and can be utilized by tissues in the body, I think most tissues. So I just gave you the breakdown of what is happening. Now the question is, how long could you keep this going for? Well, if it's not realistic, and if you're just doing this for a competition, just consider that if you're that depleted, if you're on a serious low carb to no carb routine diet. Most people that I talk to who do a plan like this, it is short-lived because there are benefits to carbohydrates, and that's the whole point of the cheat day. When people say the cheat day, I think over time they learn that, oh, this is actually not necessarily a bad thing. And so they kind of question themselves to say, oh, well, carbohydrates are not bad after all. And it's interesting how people learn how fueling their body with something at a certain point in time is beneficial, but you can't abuse it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to sit around and eat candy bars all day or fruit or whatever in excess, because then, again, metabolically, your body's going to shift into storing fat, and it makes sense. Now, I just want to say that hormones play a role in this, whether if you want to talk about insulin and other things. You know, we just can't say it's all about the diet, because really the diet and everything else plays a role. There are factors that we have to put into this in order to understand how the human body works. And that's why I used a normally healthy person comparing to my father, who is a type 2 diabetic. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I come across countless videos or people, again, online and everything, and they make money basically starving people to death. And when people get off of these horrible plans, metabolically, I think they're screwed up, and even mentally. But managing an appropriate nutrition plan is ideal for you or to anyone, just to cut out a food group. And again, we can go into detail and debate this. But the conclusion is, I like to learn how and why carbohydrates, protein, fat, lipid, however you want to call it, is useful in the body. When does the body need it? When certain things happen, whether you're fasting, starving, whatever you're doing, how does the body respond to that? Okay? If you have an excess of this, whether this could be glucose, amino acids, protein, fats, medium chain fatty acids, whatever, what does the body do? What are the conditions, and how is it metabolized? Is it metabolized? How is it absorbed? And all this stuff. How is it different? What happens? And that's basically my job. For me to say the ketone diet in and of itself is bad would be inaccurate, because as I just stated previously, there are certain levels of intensity when it comes to the low carb diet. Frankly, I actually follow a medium to low carb diet actually at this time, and there are benefits, but am I starving my body of glycogen? No. Am I starving my body of fat? No. Am I starving my body of what? Amino acids? No. But at certain times during my phase, I supplement different things until my body adapts to what I'm doing, and then I can remove that and put something else in. So that's the whole point of sports nutrition. There you go. So I hope this made sense. I tried to make it as clear as possible while providing some examples and details. I hope this video was helpful. Please share it with your friends, family, or whoever you want. Your cat or your dog. Thanks so much. Peace.